Well, if you're not ready, we are live online. I don't even remember how we used to be really bad when we first started. I think it was like about 5 seconds staring at the screen, going, "Are we online? Are we online?" I think we're online now. But I guess the team that's not online anymore is the 29 teams, including the Dallas Mavericks, because the Boston Celtics are the NBA champions, 18th banner. And I don't know about you, man, but does anyone care? That feels like
It
the reaction
was
right now. Does anyone care?
it was a it was a playoff run to be forgotten in a sense. It is very much what we talked about last week. Someone has to win it, and you've got to play what's in front of you. And for Boston, they had a pretty easy path, and the Finals MVP goes to Jaylen Brown, which some would say is a bit curious because Tatum led in all categories
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
the games, but I mean, kudos to the Boston Celtics. They were the best team all season. It's one of those things where we probably knew that Boston was pretty much a shoe-in. I think I even made a joke prediction early on that they were going to win it. And you wanted other people to win, right? I feel like the legacy implications for Luka or Jokic or even Ant were a lot more interesting than what the Boston Celtics were going to do. I know that Tatum finally gets off the list of people who haven't won a championship, but I also don't feel like it helped him as much as he maybe wanted it to, because I don't feel like there's much respect put on his name from this win. Like, yeah, he's got one, but he's got a very stacked team around him. It feels like anyone could have been in that position.
I don't know. I think there's so many points there that you touched upon, which are all true and all valid. I guess even last year when the Nuggets won, I don't think I really cared that much, and I don't think as a collective NBA fan base cared that much. But there was a little bit of Jokic was a three-time MVP, yeah,
Hmm.
which then got his ring. I guess I recall 12 months later now that then they celebrated hard, including Jokic throwing Jamal Murray into the pool, and then I think Mike Malone said some shit at the parade, and there were some little memorable points there, and then Jokic doesn't really care because he wants to go back and ride his horses, right? But right now it's like the Celtics won. Cool.
Hmm.
When's next season start? I don't even know if there was a memorable moment, a significant memorable moment of this finals that for someone like myself, I'm not a Boston fan. I did pick Boston to win, but I'm not a Boston fan that I really care that wow that stood out. And like you said, I think Tatum can definitely take his name off the list of NBA All Star. Whether you call him a superstar or not, that's another sort of debate. But that has got his ring now. He's no longer in the Carmelo sort of legacy, and I guess that's it. It's like let's talk about next season. I don't know what more there is to really sort of dissect in what happened in this last round.
No, I don't think there is. Obviously it puts Luca on the LeBron path because he's lost his flawless status in the finals. But again, because of the 3-0, I mean, that's probably what hurt the series the most. If Dallas had won game three and then game four goes back to Boston and then they're down 3-1. For some reason, that narrative would have helped us believe a little bit more. But once they went down 3-0, it was a foregone conclusion. I think there's a lot of power behind going down 3-0 that no one mentally has able to be conquering. But yeah, you're right. We're going on to next season. So I'm going to pitch something to you. I kept it secret off air so that you could be ready for it. A couple of seasons in a row now, we've had interesting finals matchups, right? And in theory, you would want the finals matchup to be the best team from the East and the best team from the West playing each other and having a really strong competitive series. And obviously, you can't always guarantee that, but you looked at the East comparatively to the West. The West had four finals contenders, right? Mavs proved that they could get there, but OKC, Denver, and Minnesota all very well could have been in the finals and done just as well, if not better,
Sure,
right? For the East, it's harder to say that there was another definitive finals contender this
sure.
season based off the injuries.
Yep.
So this is the tokenistic but necessary conversation surrounding a 1-16 format. I think in the West, it was a shame that Minnesota and Denver played each other because I think we were robbed of a better finals opponent overall for the Boston Celtics. And I know they can only play who's in front of them, but with a 1-16 format, Boston still would have done their steamroll. but we ideally would have had someone different in the finals playing them just based off how it would have matched up. Dallas might have been a second or a third round matchup for them. So your thoughts on the 1 through 16?
I'm
Throwing out
sure
history.
you've talked about the 1 through 16 at points before over the last couple of years we've podcasted, and I have never been a fan of it as far as I'm concerned. I get the merit to making it perfectly. You're trying to make it fair, I guess, in a sense, right? You're sort of taking away the conferences, and you're just saying best record means first seed, and in theory, then you could have 16 teams, or not 16, you could have 15 teams from one conference and one team from another conference. If it was that lopsided, in theory, there could be 12 Western Conference teams and 4 Eastern Conference teams potentially in that situation, because the East has been weak for many years. But I think the part that I'm not a fan of it is that you can never create the perfect matchups. Yeah, that's the point. This is sport. You can never create the perfect matchups, which is why I've never been a fan of creating the perfect rule set, as in, eliminating all errors of rules, because that's not what sport is. That's not what basketball is, to be more specific. It's at the end of the day, you're sort of saying, oh, the Mavs shouldn't have been here. Yeah, but so if they shouldn't have been here, the Thunder should have beaten them. If they shouldn't have been here, the Wolves should have beaten them, and they did not. So the Mavs got here because they beat those teams, and so they should have been here, and that's all there is to it. I'm not sure how you can sort of justify that, even though they had a lower record, yes, in the regular season, they won the same amount of, or they won their rounds through. Okay, let's say they didn't get the easier path, and they probably didn't. Yeah, they didn't get as many sort of core injuries or key injuries that the Celtics faced with their opponents this year, but the Mavs beat these teams and they got to the finals. Why are we saying they shouldn't have been here? Why are we trying to create a different scenario where maybe,
Well,
I don't know, the T-Wolves got here? Well, the T-Wolves could have got here if they just beat the Mavs.
they could have. Agreed. I think it's more when you think back about the series that we witnessed, not just the finals, because sometimes what can happen is the conference finals can be more interesting than that. For you, what series would you say was the most entertaining, interesting, really keen to see how that one plays out? What series would you pick?
This year.
Yep.
I was a big fan, obviously, and you know this, of the Knicks.
Yep.
And I think a lot of their games, especially the ones in Philly, that was the first round. Yeah, they went to nail biter, a couple of OT games, just bodies just flying around, and players playing 40 minutes, obviously, because that's how the Knicks play. And Sixers sort of had to try and match that sort of style, because they're not that deep in that sense either. How many games did they go? 6, 7? I don't even remember now.
I believe they
Six,
did go to 7.
seven.
So
Did they go 7?
Indy
Yeah.
went 7 against.
And
Sorry, 6 for Philly and
okay,
7 for Indiana. My
Indiana.
apologies.
Okay, and they lost in 7, correct? And by the time they lost in 7, the Knicks obviously had no players left to actually suit up at that point, almost. So when Brunson went down as well with his injury, so I think that was intriguing watching. I think if you jump to the West a little bit, I think OKC, watching them play as a young and upcoming team, the OKC and the Mavs series was I think a one that, this is going to probably be a matchup for many years to come potentially. These are still teams that have got young superstars and talent that are going to be around for many years. So, but again, this whole playoffs. Okay, and again, this is the stats guy part where we're talking about, hey, stats guy, what was the viewership for the 2024 playoffs as a whole? And I'd have to probably guess right now that it was probably down across the board, because for many reasons. But just the lack of appealing matchups, maybe. I don't know, man.
Well, maybe just this is where legacies get carried, and it's important for Curry and LeBron and even Jimmy Butler to a degree to be in the finals. And maybe people just collectively didn't care about Boston as much as they would have hoped. If Indiana made it, I think there would have been a lot of intrigue around who's the young star that's about to get a ring. Maybe it's just fatigue because Boston's been there for so long that they had to get one eventually. And I guess because it's finally defaulted into happening, now we're like, okay, cool. So who's next? And I guess if that's our segue off it, OKC trades Josh Giddey for Alex Caruso. So supposedly a report came out saying that Josh Giddey did not feel comfortable coming off the bench for his role. and kindly requested a trade. It's an interesting thing. I don't know Josh Giddey very well, but you would figure surely he would know that he's on a good wicket in terms of finals opportunities, that he would stay put. But clearly, young guy wants his own team, so he goes to Chicago and they get a really good defender in return to pair with Lou Dort, who's already a really good defender. And you have to feel OKC has more potential for moves. They didn't give up any picks for that. They just gave up one player. So is OKC already priming themselves for a deeper run than what they had this season?
I think that's a no-brainer. Of course they are.
Yeah,
I'm not sure how there's a take on this, man. OKC finished with the best record in the West. They're one of the youngest teams out there. Again, injuries is a key component here that any organization has to avoid. But I think they've probably learnt a few things with their history with talented superstars, young talented superstars, with Durant, with Westbrook, with Harden. Okay, and I think there's a lot more camaraderie, all right, in this sort of group. They definitely want to play together, they want to grow together, and they want to win together. And I think right now, clearly, um, SGA, Jalen Williams, and Chet are the cornerstones. And Giddy was, in all honesty, a lot of the stuff you watch after games and post media and little stuff like that, you never saw him in these groups. Yeah, you always saw these three guys, and we knew they were the top best guys, but you never saw Giddy sort of hanging off one of these guys or jumping in there. And it was not shocking that Giddy, despite his talent and also his flaws that he can't shoot in the bigger sense, is that he's being moved because I don't think he actually really fit that well from an eye test with this group from that chemistry perspective.
it's not a bad observation. I think uh, it reminds me a little bit of the process Philadelphia 76ers, right? So Embiid and Ben Simmons are the standouts from that whole process. But I think people forget Michael Carter Williams was rookie of the year with them and did really well. And they also drafted Jahlil Okafor with the number one pick as well. And neither of those two players were on the team when they were having success and doing the actual playoff runs and getting the free agents. And I think that's the thing with OKC, kind of floating. They get Paul George paired up with Carmelo and Russell Westbrook. And then when they finally move on from him and Westbrook, they kind of faltered a little bit. And Giddy was really good. And Giddy, it's early in his career, so we don't know. But maybe Giddy is a player who, when you give him the ball, he can do good stats, right?
Well,
18 points, 7 rebounds, 7 assists.
I actually really, really like this trade for both teams. Okay, and from a Giddy perspective, yes, I read the reports too that he asked to be out of OKC. He didn't want to play a six-man role in that sort of sense. And true, false, I don't know. Probably, I guess there's a sense of a young player that wants minutes and wants to be have the ability to sort of show his game in that sense. So fair enough. Maybe there's a trade-off that he goes, I'm willing to leave OKC, clearly one of the best teams in the league and going to be probably a really powerhouse team for the next 5 to 10 years, potentially still even, all right, in that sort of sense, that I'm willing to go somewhere else. And the fact he landed at the Bulls, I think is a great landing spot for him. Okay, I've harped on about the Bulls for 2 years now, give or take, that they needed a pure point guard. Yeah, when they lost Lonzo Ball, I keep saying this, man, it just sticks in my head that when they lost Lonzo Ball, they were first in the East. Yeah, and Lonzo Ball was that pass first guard, and I'm not saying Giddy's necessarily as good as Lonzo Ball as he was at that point. Okay, and he's much younger, obviously. I think he's still a few years younger than he was at that point when Lonzo Ball was still playing on the floor at that point. That but he's that right fit. I think right now the Bulls should sit tight. I don't think they should go and make any crazy moves. I think they give DeRozan some money. They give him at least a couple more years here and see what happens. They bring Levine back and hopefully they get him healthy because he didn't play that many games this season. All right, and let's see what they can do. Can they grab a play-off spot, not a play-in spot, top six spots in the East, and we all know the East is weak, with a pure point guard that they've sort of lacked for all these years, yeah? And Kobe White now has obviously elevated himself to a starter and rotational player, and it's really good. Man, I think the Bulls shouldn't go crazy right now. If they suddenly tear the core apart again, I think, I don't know, I feel like they're hitting panic too early.
I think I think ironically they will hit panic a little bit. I think they're going to start collecting some young assets and go for a bit of a rebuild, right? I think you could convince a couple of teams to part with young players like that and get returns. I think the surprise for a lot of people was the fact that Alex Caruso, pretty lucrative defender that the entire league would be happy to acquire, goes for one player and there was no picks involved. But then there's connotations as well. Alex Caruso is on the last year of his deal. So, yeah, you get him for a season, but then there's implications immediately for you in which you either have to flip him again or you have to re-sign him, and there's salary cap that goes with that. But it's an interesting trade to be put of already, considering the draft is yet to occur. Obviously, the draft will happen later this week, and then we'll have some more action to talk about. And yeah, I mean that's one big thing that's happened. But
I think on that note here, and we talk about, you asked basically your first question is the OKC Thunder prime to make another leap here? And look, right now next season they want to make conference finals. Yeah, anything less than conference finals would be a step back, and then now they got to go, what's going on? What is the pieces we need to add or subtract here in that sort of sense, which is not a great suggestion. So, they need to make conference finals in theory, maybe even get out of the West, but the West is always getting deeper. Yeah, but here's the question I have: if Porzingis or maybe I'll rephrase it, is Porzingis the key to the Celtics becoming a dynasty here? Yeah, because I think, to me, right now, he's having surgery now, okay? He didn't play that many minutes. He reminds me a bit of Kawhi. He reminds me a little bit of Kawhi, right? Like, Kawhi, when he plays, makes a difference. But when he doesn't play, obviously, it makes no difference at all. And then the bigger question is, like, how many games can he play? Can he stay healthy for, say, 20 so games in the playoffs and finals, all right, when it matters? And how important is that? Like, do you think this Boston Celtics team is a dynasty that everyone's talking about? Yes, the two best players are young. Yeah, 26, 27, I think. Yeah, but the rest of the crew is aging. Is Porzingis the key?
I think a lot went right for Boston this season that you never want to ping a team for, but for that to happen again, for them to go all the way through to the finals and play an easier matchup from the West, I don't think that happens again. Porzingis is definitely the X factor. I think the Drew Holiday acquisition and his impact helps them, along with Derek White, obviously growing in. I think people forget that Derek White is also quite young, like he kind of matches the core a little bit. So I think they're fine on that front. But I'd even make the stronger case and say, I think dynasties, like I made a take a while back and currently I'm doing well and my batting average is 100%. I don't think
2 from 2.
Well, I don't think anyone in this decade is going to be able to go back to back. I think the league, its parity, its competitiveness, I think it's going to be difficult for a team to win 2 in a row. And so when you look at what Boston's got to do, well, they've got to go up against a Milwaukee squad that has the potential to be healthier and get a full season of reps with the same coach and the same lineup. So that's dangerous. Indiana will come back better, right? Tyrese will finally have time to heal, and Indiana clearly proves that they have something within them. The Knicks, if Thibodeau can figure out that you don't need to play everyone 45 minutes a game, then they're right back in it. Philadelphia, it's always a dice roll with Joel Embiid, but surely that dice roll lands on his favorable side at least once. Miami always loiters there, and that's just from the East.
There
right?
hasn't been an inevitable dynasty since KD left Golden State.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. I think that's the reality.
And I don't think Porzingis is a huge X factor for them, but we saw the injury-prone stuff, right? We saw it this season. He lucked out. He played probably the same amount of games that he's played in previous years. The only difference was he had a really good squad around him to keep him in significant games. And, yes, he played 3 games in the finals, but he really only played 1.5 because Game 5 was very tokenistic, so he could get out there and be a part of the winning game, the clincher of the series. And in Game 2, he ends up getting hurt. So, they got the value out of him. But to rely on him for another full season after whatever this injury does to him, because this does require surgery and there's a rehab and a healing process that goes into this, I would not feel comfortable saying Boston goes back again. And that's no discredit to them. I think it's just a credit to the fact that the league is competitive and anything can happen. And for this season, it was Boston's turn. It fell really nicely for them, but it could have fallen really nicely for anybody else in the East.
Well, since it could go to anyone here, Is JJ Redick the next Steve Kerr? Hey, what do you think? Is JJ Redick the next Steve Kerr, or is he the next Steve Nash? Yeah, what is it? That's clearly the pathway right now. We talk about pathways for Luca, right?
It's
LeBron,
the Steve
MJ.
pathway.
Yeah, the
You're on the
Steve.
Steve line.
Yeah, it's we're taking the Steve line now with JJ Redick. Obviously, he's been given the 4 year deal. I don't know how much money was thrown his way. I don't think it's ever really been disclosed right now
I
how
don't
much
think.
money
Yeah, I
was
haven't
thrown.
seen a figure.
4 years, obviously, to take the Lakers back into the playoffs. That's a goal. Final few seasons with LeBron, more likely than not. And then who knows what happens with the Lakers after that, right? But I think I like JJ Redick. Yeah, let's be clear. Okay, like I think I've said this before. Yeah, he was a Magic player. I loved him when he was a Magic player, even before he broke out, and then he was, became a rotational and key contributor for our team. I was really sad in the sense that he was traded and got moved on. Did he get traded or did he walk? I can't remember. All right, but obviously he
He
left.
got traded to Milwaukee.
Yeah, and then obviously he left, and then obviously had a few great seasons with the Lob City Clippers, obviously as a shooter, surrounding all those dunk threats with CP3, and um, and then obviously he sort of then faded out, I think, from there, in that sort of sense. It's funny because he was actually drafted after LeBron, and obviously he finished his career clearly before LeBron, and now he's coaching him now. But I am skeptical whether he's got to move the needle, man, in the Lakerland right now. I think there's a lot sort of heaped on him right now that's suggesting that he's going to be a highly successful coach. But from a wins perspective, I think we're all sort of thinking they're just going to be again at that 500 at best sort of mark here, unless they make some crazy moves. I don't know. Do they land Paul George and Trey Young? I don't know, man.
Well, the biggest issue with the Lakers has always been the personnel, really. Like, ever since they won the championship, that Westbrook trade really should be analyzed deeper as a trade that destroyed a team because they had Caruso and Kyle Kuzma and Kentavious Caldwell Pope, players who have had impact on other teams now, two of which, for legitimate defensive purposes. So it was a really interesting trade that they did. But also the way that they built their team as well, picking up Dwight and Rajon Rondo, savvy veterans. They don't build the Lakers like that anymore, right? Like they really put a lot of stock in those second round picks that they acquire. Like Hood Schifino is a name that I've heard way too many times for a guy that I don't think I've ever seen play basketball. So, the way that the Lakers fan base has to cope with things is probably an interesting study in and of itself. I think Redick will do a decent job. I think he's far more likely to have the Steve Nash path than he is the Steve Kerr path because he's not inheriting a budding dynasty that's ahead of the way that the game was played. I think that's what Steve Kerr really benefited from. He realized that the league was turning into more threes. He had the best shooting backcourt of all time, and he let them go before everyone else started to let their backcourts go. So I think Steve Nash is his path. I think it'll be interesting to see if he plays out the full 4 years. Obviously, surely if Redick finishes 4 years of coaching with the Lakers, he's not still coaching LeBron by the end of it, and they have to have moved on. I've seen a rumor that Anthony Davis might be packaged in a trade. I don't know why you would do that.
I don't think so.
Because like AD really is the successor. I think not just for the franchise, but for them to have any chance of winning. And then it's also like it's another thing. What if the Lakers had finished better in their seeding and they never had to play Denver? And, let's pretend that they got against the Dallas matchup or they got the Clippers matchup and they were able to roll through to the conference finals and they play a Minnesota team that's young and inexperienced and maybe, they're in the finals and everything's different. I think for the Lakers, JJ Redick doesn't do enough to alter your luck. I think other things need to happen, like LeBron being 40 or 41 and not getting injured and being great, and Anthony Davis having another healthy career year. I think when you start saying that stuff out loud, you realize there's no chance that they win a championship.
I think it'll be interesting who they put the sort of assistant coaches around Redick and who he sort of decides to bring in as part of his staff. One of the funny names is being floated around is Stan Van Gundy. That would be a real full circle sort of situation to bring Stan Van Gundy as an assistant coach under JJ Redick in Lakerland, man. That's just funny shit and good on him, right? But look, I think at the end of the day, it's a huge learning curve. I think you're probably right that it's more Steve Nash like. Oh, I'd love to see him succeed. Don't get me wrong. I'd love to see him as a head coach for the next 10, 20 years, as long as he wants to coach in that sort of sense, until he's an old fella, right? But I think I think there's going to be a lot of challenges here, not including the fact that he's under Lakerland pressure in that sort of sense to succeed, and getting 30 wins is not going to cut it in Lakerland, man. You got to at least get into the playoffs, I think, consistently, and even at that point, if your team doesn't look that competitive, then you're already now on the chopping board. So, I think. I don't know, man. I don't know if he's going to see out his 4 year contract. I think that's the part, right? And I don't know right now. I'm gonna write a bet against that he sees his 4 year contract out. Maybe he gets 2 years in Lakerland, and then maybe the part where LeBron has to retire at some point, right? Isn't that the point? How long has he played for? Till he's 45? I don't know, man. Maybe we'll play until Bryce plays, right? How many more years till he maybe declares? I don't know. It's like, but look, I just don't necessarily think he's gonna play out his contract. What do you think he's gonna get 4 years in LA?
Well, I think any coach getting the full contract length, like Monty Williams has already gone out of his 5 or 6 year
Well, that's
deal.
what I
It
was gonna
was
say. Well, that's the flip side, right? The luckiest man in the world is playing the NBA right now. You got $60 million or so owed to you, and you don't have to do shit.
but I'm pretty sure he's also getting paid from Phoenix. Like the way that these contracts are stipulated, I like this is the thing. JJ Redick wants to give coaching a go. I can see him having a Luke Walton S sort of path, where Luke Walton obviously gets an extended stint. He will need to have a lot more success than Luke Walton did, but the way that JJ talks about the game, his work ethic, everything that he's done, it sounds like he will be successful. Inheriting a team like this instead of maybe a young team that he could work with, maybe that's problematic. There's definitely got to be an interesting dynamic with the fact that you're only a couple of months older than your best player who has the power legitimately to make or break your career. So,
No, he's younger than LeBron.
that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, that you're
Yeah,
that
so
your
he's
best
younger
player's
than LeBron,
older.
which is funny. So a whole lot have been made about his relationship with LeBron because they do that podcast together and stuff like that. And obviously they've known each other in the league, they played against each other in that sort of sense. And I don't know how much of that is relevant. Like, just because you get along with your players from that perspective, like you have a friendship with them, a personal friendship with them, that's the reality here, is that come crunch time, it's designing schemes and making the decisions in game that are going to help you get that W. And unless we're leading towards that, LeBron just got to make those calls, and JJ's like happy to go along with it, man. Like I think that's
My strategy. My
I don't
strategy right out.
I don't know if that's the whole strategy, then sure. But otherwise, I think LeBron is a real defined product of what you can and can't do. Yeah, and clearly the Lakers, like you talked about, have not put the right pieces around him since that bubble ring, if you want to call it. And there was many other factors, including the fact why it's called the bubble ring in that sort of sense that haven't really helped them succeed. And yeah, I don't know. I don't think they're looking to make those moves, or they can make those moves at this point to move the needle in that sense.
I think the Lakers have done a good job of having them in a conversation when it should have been about the Celtics winning the NBA championship, or it should have been about, OKC making a legitimate move. I think that's probably the big thing, really. I think Lakers PR is top notch and better than the average person's because, yeah, this is one of those like, oh, cool moments. I don't really know what's going to change, but this is also the part of just begun. The draft hasn't even happened yet. Free agency is not for another week and a bit. And I guess it leads into us talking about, well, what does it look like for our spare time as the NBA is run out?
Well, we're going to obviously take a bit of a break, but before we head into this break, I'm going to ask you two names. I'll give you two names, man. I'm going to ask you, where do you think they're going to land, man? The first name here, where they're going to land and where they should land, yeah? All right, first name here is Paul George. Paul George. Where's Paul George going to go, man? Where's Paul George going to go? Is he going to go to Orlando? Like, I don't know if I should be excited or not. Like, Paul George, Banchero, Wagner, throw him some money. And then I've seen all the social media memes that every time we signed a vet, it's gone pear-shaped, including pictures of Patrick Ewing in a Magic uniform, Sean Kemp when he was like, 400 pounds. Who else did we sign? Serge Ibaka did nothing for us. And we've had, let's be clear, there's other names that come through our doors. Vince Carter, Gilbert Arenas. Is Paul George going to be in one of those categories, or is he still at a point of his career where he's going to be able to get us into the top four in the East and get to the conference finals, perhaps?
I think the two teams that are, well, I'm going to say three teams. I think three teams are poised to make a big name acquisition. One of them is the Lakers by default. I just feel like the Lakers always find a way to get themselves on a headline, and they can't ever stay put on a team. So I could see the Lakers picking up Paul George.
They've got nothing to do for Paul George. What are they going to do for Paul George to get him to there?
I look, just I'm parking that there. If something happens, I get to be clairvoyant. If nothing happens, we don't mention it.
If LeBron doesn't pick up his extension, then they have cap space to sign Paul George. Is that what you're saying?
D'Angelo Russell has some movement as well. I would say OKC. I just think OKC's draft capital, their variety of contracts that they've got, that's another team where you could see having an acquisition. And it would be pretty funny if Paul George goes to OKC and the Clippers have nothing to show for it, and OKC has everyone. But yeah, Orlando is another team that feels primed to do something. If Paul George goes,
I don't think OKC should swing for Paul George. Do you think OKC should swing for Paul George? Because I don't think they should.
I have no issue with that. I think because
I feel like this would be a Devin Booker in Phoenix situation where you have a clear-cut superstar in SGA plus a young surrounding cast like you guys had with Mikal Bridges and Aiden. Whether you want to say Aiden was a sidekick superstar, all-star or not sort of caliber player, that's another conversation. But you guys had that, and you guys sort of then decide to go, swing for the fences in that sense. It has not paid off for you guys. Right now, OKC are in a good spot. Right now, they do not need Paul George. Paul George does not help them.
Paul George isn't KD, and I think you look at their depth, for example, and there's not a lot of shot making outside of SGA, and you saw that in the Dallas series specifically. That's where Paul George slots in. I think Paul George is older and more mature now that he doesn't have to be a star player, but also we know he's not a star player. So I don't think he comes in like a KD. KD, as you've referenced, it is a legitimate debate. Is he the best player on the Phoenix Suns because of his history, but also his offensive repertoire, that he and Booker are competing, right? I'd even make a case and say it was the acquisition of Beal that doesn't make sense. For OKC, their second best player in the playoffs never scored above 13 points. And when you think about what pushes them over the edge, well, Alex Caruso is not doing that. So that's where I think Paul George can have a legitimate stake. Paul George could go to OKC, average 20 points, and it's a win.
OKC doesn't need... OKC is relying on internal development. Jalen Williams is going to get better year 3, yeah? Chet in year 2 is going to get better. Even SGA potential still has, room to grow in that sort of sense. These are players already there, along with their younger rotational bench players like Carson Wallace and so on and so forth. Yeah, they're going to get better. Yeah, and they bring in Caruso already as a defensive vet in that sort of sense. They don't need PG. They don't need PG. I don't know. I would hate it if he ended up in OKC. I don't see that as a positive move.
Well, if he ends up on Orlando, you'd worry about the same thing, right? Unless Wagner gets packaged, because Paolo's clearly asserted himself as being the better player of the two based off the playoff.
But we don't need to move players. We've got money. We've got cap space.
I feel like having Paul George, Paolo, and Wagner is wasteful in of itself, and that's the other issue. So, and then you need to get off one of the. Personally, I say you get off Wagner if you had to make the call, and you get off Wagner because if he stays on a team with Paul George and Paolo, then I think his production takes even a further dip, and you lose trade value for him. But then again, this new collective bargaining agreement, maybe we're about to have a really interesting offseason where one-for-one trades come back. Because that's the other thing that I don't think people really talked about. How long ago was it that two players were traded one-for-one like that with Giddey and Caruso? Normally it's always a lopsided, we get 2 picks and the player and you get 1 player in return for salary purposes. Like, you don't get one-for-ones very often. I think this second apron stuff that I sort of understand, but admittedly listening to experts talk about it helps me understand it better. I think there's going to be some really interesting off-season moves.
I think PG's best fit probably is Philly. and I would love to see him going to Philly. That's my pick. I think that Philly are getting desperate. Yeah, and they sort of need to, yeah, because Embiid is their centerpiece, MVP caliber player when healthy. Okay, and Maxi is a good piece, but he is yet to, and he's 23, okay, and he's gonna get better still too. Great, okay, but he's yet to show that he can carry the whole workload by himself. Yeah, when Embiid went out, Sixers sort of crashed. Yeah, and I think PG is a better fit for him there and landing there in a potential win now, at least in the East situation, as long as we stay healthy. All right, and that's where I think he's going to end up, and I think that's his best fit. Yeah, I think his days in Clipperland is probably numbered, and so should be. Is anyone saying Clippers going to win the 2025 championship with Kawhi, PG, and James Harden now in their mid 30s? I don't think so.
Well, you've seen it long enough, right? And that's probably sometimes the thing. That's maybe why we didn't feel very happy about Boston, is because we've actually seen it long enough that they kept getting to the conference finals and the finals that, well, they had to win one. Like, because there's enough history to say it's going to happen. Whereas with the Clippers, our history with the Clippers is Kawhi gets hurt every playoffs and he doesn't last. And the closest they came was in 21 when they made it to the conference finals. But unfortunately, they'd already lost Kawhi by that point too. So, that's what we know about the Clippers. And Harden and Westbrook didn't push the needle for them. Not that anyone should have expected that, because again, the history of Harden is that too, and like, I guess when we talk about what are the implications for next season, OKC already got to the second round on their first crack at it, and they're only going to get better. Indiana should only get better, and Denver should loiter around. Minnesota should stay there or get better. We kind of know the teams that are going to get there, and that's probably why we get excited about Paul George moving, because we know that he stays on the Clippers, nothing happens. We know him going somewhere else at least changes their chances.
Where do you think Paul George is going to land for you? Give us your pick.
I think Philly. I actually think Philly, because I think the coaching aspect is probably what's going to tip it over, right? I think having Nick Nurse as a coach, I think he fills in the Tobias Harris role better than Tobias Harris did, and that's the big piece that's going out for them. They don't have his contract on the books anymore. I think the appeal of playing with Embiid and Maxey, which is an interesting combo where all three of them are pretty potent, but Paul George should know that he's going to get a bit of a run and still be able to bid for an all-star push, because Embiid won't play the full season and him and Maxey can do their thing. And also he's got to realize that the East is better, unless we're about to get swerved and he somehow ends up in Indiana. I don't know how he does it, but Paul George back in Indiana.
Back to India. That's a we might as well sign Dwight Howard, because with our cap space, right?
He's always waiting for a sign.
Hey, look, second name. I want to sort of go out on here. All right, is four-time NBA champion. Is it four, I believe?
Klay Thompson.
Klay Thompson, yeah. And obviously he is surprisingly, well, not actually, maybe not surprisingly, yeah, but maybe, it's just a sort of distinction of where he is at his career right now. He's not getting much chatter. He's just one of the other supporting pieces here, okay? I think Klay, for example, going to the Thunder would be a much better move. Yeah. Let's say 3 years. 3 years, Klay Thompson at the Thunder. All right, which would be crazy, because, it gives him a chance to win some more rings there on a team that's, ready to win championships. Of course, he could also land in like Orlando. Clearly, one of the stories here is to keep him in the Warriors uniform for life. Or, of course, the other one that probably pops up here, because he has a bit of history, is the Lakers too. I think that's another potential landing spot for Klay Thompson. I don't know. Do you see him finishing his career out with the Golden State Warriors? Or is he doing to do like a Tony Parker or a D Wade? He's going to do a detour, and then, that sort of wraps up his career. I don't know. Maybe they bring him back for one more run at the end. Who knows? Maybe not. Is there that much sentimental feelings for Klay Thompson despite everything they've done together?
I'm picking up the mic for this one. That's very interesting. I was ready to say definitively he will stay put. And then when you mentioned Tony Parker and Dwayne Wade specifically, I think you planted something in my head that makes me now believe that he won't stay put.
Mm.
Klay Thompson was not the guy at Golden State. He was number two.
Mm.
And his legacy is pretty cemented, and it doesn't really matter what he does on the Warriors anymore. Steph Curry was the engine that made that dynasty go, right? Draymond's got a place in it. Clay's got a place in it. So do some of the other players. But yeah, like you think about Tony Parker, he didn't stay on the Spurs because I guess he wanted to see something else, and he wasn't the Tim Duncan of the team. Dwayne Wade left because he wasn't the Shaq or the LeBron of his teams, respectively. So could Clay go? Yeah, I reckon you're right. I reckon Clay does go. Now, where does he go? You're anti-Paul George going to OKC. I'm anti-Klay Thompson going to OKC. I think that hurts them immensely. I don't think that helps them at all. Klay Thompson will shoot you out of a game, but also he's very much a system player. I don't know what he brings to OKC.
Five out. OKC plays 5 out.
And a lot of teams play 5 out. I don't think he...
So Clay in the corner as your fourth, fifth option, surely...
They're a defensive team. They're a defensive team, and his defense is not at the rate that it needs to be. I don't love it. You can see Orlando taking someone like Klay Thompson because of that veteran experience for a young team that's trying to push it. Admittedly, what's Clay's motivation to do that? Money, I would have to assume, assuming that the money's better at Orlando than it is at Golden State. Then would he go to Philly? Because Philly's got the cap space as well. Well,
does Philly want him? I don't think Philly would want him. I don't think it's the right fit.
I don't know what he offers them, because Tobias Harris has, had shot creation potential and defensive potential. I think that's what they need, and that's why Paul George fits that role better. Could he end up on someone like Indiana? I don't think the money's there. Can he end up on the Knicks and he can tear his other ACL or Achilles playing 48 minutes a game? Probably not. The Lakers, Lakers always get attached to big names. Maybe like I'm going to chuck in a sleeper team that has no merit, but the Sacramento-Houston sort of field for him. Both teams on the edge of making the playoffs, needing a little bit of guidance. You think about Sacramento.
They don't have cap space. They don't have cap space, nor do they have assets that they would move for the Warriors to take back.
I think this offseason you're going to see some interesting stuff happen because of the limitations of movement. I think people are going to give up on assets or give up on contracts because they understand that's the only viable move they have. So for Klay Thompson, because he's an unrestricted free agent, you can sign him theoretically for whatever fits. You can trade out things depending on what part of your apron is. I just think it's really hard to predict explicitly who can and can't make it work anymore because the rules have changed. So Klay Thompson not being on the Warriors, no, I don't think it's unfathomable, because I think we've seen a lot of Robins / second best players in a dynasty era.
So where's his best fit? Where's he going? You're saying now that you're thinking he might leave the Warriors, okay? And it wouldn't be shocking like tomorrow we get a boring news headline. Klay Thompson agrees to 3 more years with the Warriors, and no one blinks an eyelid, right? Because that's it.
I think I'm feeling a little bit inspired, and I'm probably overdue for something. So here it is. I think the Shanghai Sharks. I think a bit of an Asian Chinese push for Klay Thompson is probably the boost that he needs. There's a Netflix documentary about Stephen Marbury. It's actually a really good watch, and it talks about how
Stephen Marbury.
Yeah. And he had a...
Who the hell's Stephen Marbury?
Stefan.
Stephen Marbury. What the hell? So, makes you gotta go Stephen Curry.
No. So Stefan Marbury has a bit of a resurgence in China and gets like a second career out of it. I think for Klay Thompson,
great. Thanks. So after 2 years, you've thrown all our credibility out the window in the last 5 minutes of our 2024 season of live streaming podcasts. This is the first time we obviously live streamed for our audience of max 2. Which was probably me and you, maybe.
I'm not watching it. Someone else is watching it. Thank you so much. Oh my God. I didn't realize we had to engage with the audience.
So your suggestion is terrible because you're trying to not even commit where Klay is going to land. I'm saying the Thunder should give him some money. He goes there. 51% chance of that. 49% chance he signs with the Warriors. Anywhere else, he's taking the money because he wants to win championships, surely. Yeah, imagine Klay. Let's round this one off. Imagine Klay has more rings than Steph and Draymond.
It won't matter though.
Would that
It wouldn't matter.
wouldn't that make him the goat warrior?
No, no. Nice try.
All right, until next season.